in the early Bible stories about the fall, like when Adam and Eve fall from paradise in the garden, when they eat the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil, then they become self-conscious, so they clothe themselves and become aware of the future and the past, and that was like the fall from paradise. And so I think something has been lost for sure. But then the main question is what we are now, does it justify that? Because we've been given this huge load, like to be self-conscious and to be aware of death and to be aware of the future, and all these things are painful. And it doesn't seem like a grizzly bear walking through the woods is so concerned with the fact it's going to die. It probably doesn't it never even knows.
But does he listen to music, and does he read books?
Yeah.
And does he fall in love 100 times?
Does he get to read poetry?
Heartbroken.
Yeah.
So it's, I guess the truth is, in every moment, everything you are is a balance of what you've lost and what you've gained. Like, that is part of the human experience, right? Mm-hmm. And that we can take the time to measure that, or we can just be. Mm-hmm. Where's the balance, right? Yeah. But I think it's important to take stock and recognize, it is harder, and yet beauty and love and heartache because you had something and it's gone, and excitement because there's possibility and it may or may not happen. So like it's that same profound thing, right? Mm. That it is, there is all this because the possibility of losing it all matters too, right? So that's the paradox of being human. It's like we go round and round and round. Yeah. No matter how far we go out in the conversation of the circle, we sort of land back in the beginning. We're like, oh, that's where we started a while ago.
It's like a good conversation is like a microcosm of life in some way. Like we go through articulating as much as we can, as many different parts of it as we can, and we just kind of keep on coming back to where we started. Like, and if you think about before being born as the same thing as being dead, then we go back to where we started too.
Yeah, I think I do, and I think I secretly believe that.
Yeah,
I do think that that there's a roundness to it all.
Yeah, circle of life. I love watching The Lion King because
it's so good.
Mufasa's walking Simba through the Pride Lands, and he's explaining how everything's all one and all connected and all that stuff. And Simba's like, "But Dad, don't we kill and eat the gazelle?" He's like, "Yes, we do, son. But someday we will die, and the earth will turn us into grass, and the gazelle will eat us."
So great.
Like, yeah. So that's the stuff. Yeah. Shoot me up with some more of that stuff.
I had this thought the other day. I forget why. I think I was talking to someone about funerals and burying people. And I had this profound moment of sadness because I was like, how sad is it that we no longer give ourselves to the earth when we die? And then I was like, whoa, is that a demented thought to have? But I was like, at some point we started putting ourselves in boxes so that we didn't get given back to the earth.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's really unnatural and weird.
Not just that, but by embalming our bodies, we pull that process even further from itself, because embalmed bodies don't break down the way that unembalmed bodies do.
So where does the stuff they take out of us go? So eventually it all does come back. I realized that at some point the box will break down, but I was like, it's interesting that we have removed ourselves from that process. Yeah. We started to care so much about the body being us. Yeah. Mm. That instead of just burying ourselves with flowers and gifts and possessions, we actually were like, let's try to save this.
It's it's a reach of immortality beyond the actual confines of life. The Egyptians did it crazily. There's certain bogs in the world. I know of them in kind of northern Europe more than other places, but they're peat bogs.
Yeah.
Peat itself is so rich in what it is that no little microorganisms can live. And so if you drop something into the bog, it will stay there in the more or less the form that it went in for thousands and thousands of years. And so there's all of these bog bodies that are gruesome to look at, but super cool at the same time, because they are preserved to the detail of fingertips, like fingerprints and eyelashes. And it's just that as soon as they hit the air again, they start to decompose very rapidly, but they otherwise are... I don't know how
show us some stuff.
I'll show you some pictures of bog bodies.
Yeah.
I feel you, though. I've been I'm very open and candid about my psychedelic use, but I've been many times just laying on the forest floor, tripping, and just being so, like, just thinking, if this was my last exhale and I just dissolved, I could almost feel like this sinking feeling into the soil and just like becoming part of the forest again or something. Like, there's something, for me, it feels so correct about that. It just feels like the right kind of closure that the nutrients in my body would fertilize soil. So that's crazy.
They've dated them back as far as 8,000 BC to the Second World War. So they exist in that range. And so
that person still has their hat.
So they're naturally mummified, I guess.
They are, but the peat itself does dye the bodies, and that's why they have the skin turns very black and
they look almost like statues.
Yeah. And their hair turns very red, and that's all to do with what is in the peat. But otherwise, like this guy, he's got this crazy face. He's a very well preserved one. This guy was dug up by an excavator, so he got really damaged.
Oh.
Some of them were sacrificially put into the bog, so...
oh my god.
This guy still has a rope around his neck. I've definitely spent too many hours looking at this online.
This is so fascinating.
But yeah, like, they have such crazy details. Like, this guy's face is very, very, very detailed. He still has, 5 o'clock shadow. His fingers have... Like, you can see his nails and his cuticles and everything.
That's
that guy
amazing.
could just, like, wake up and start talking to you. Oh, that's just a cartoon.
Yeah. Wow.
So, like, I think, that's the hand of the peaceful-faced man.
That guy does have a really peaceful face. Maybe he just, like, died of old age by his family or something.
Yeah, right? The rarest of events, dying peacefully.
Yeah, so it's speculated whether or
not being ripped apart by bears or something.
But whether or not they were placed into the bog carefully or whether or not they were thrown in there for disposal. But I think at a certain point they probably could have known that bog had this kind of capacity. And so there's something very, the way that bodies are treated after death is a very, very interesting thing. And globally, it takes so many different forms. Here we are really boring in some ways comparatively because, like, some cultures, they care more about the concept of the living person as not their physical body. There's what Malagans, I think, is the right term for it, but I think in New Zealand or somewhere in that sector of the world, they do these elaborate carvings for people who have died, and it won't be one for every person like a tombstone, but say every year whomever has died within that time frame, there are these very specific members of the community, and I think they're only men who do it, but they have these carving shops that nobody is allowed into, and they do these incredibly detailed carvings, and then they take them and if it's for a man, they drop them into the middle of the woods, and if it's for a woman, I think they may sometimes put them at like a shore's edge somewhere. Yeah. But they take these very beautiful wooden carvings and they just drop them into the wilderness and let them rot. And that's the whole purpose of it. It's this ephemeral way of honoring the dead, but it has nothing to do with the body, whereas in other places, the bodies themselves, some African cultures, they sit with the body in the house for weeks. Yeah. And they dress it and they they feed it, or in certain Asian cultures they have, I'm going to forget this, I think, but it's like a paper lantern ceremony, and I can't remember all of it, but that they talking ghosts, I think it's called, maybe. Mm-hmm. And so they have these rituals where they put a full spread of food at the tomb of their deceased person, and like if, say, for instance, a son dies without having married, then they find somebody else's family who has a deceased daughter, and then they marry off their son so that in the afterlife he is set. And it's kind of that same concept as with the Egyptians, that they would embalm these bodies, and then they would also fill these canopic jars with the things that they would need in the afterlife. And that's why you have tombs that have honey that have been stored since the Egyptian times. It's like these just crazy the way that people have tried to achieve immortality without having any capacity to be there for it.
And is it achieving immortality, or is it just the sense, like at the root of it, of us telling ourselves there's a next thing?
Yeah.
It's so weird because it's like, it seems like a human universal in different cultures that there's some sort of conception of next, and only recently have we not been able to really find any scientific evidence of such a thing. But how could we if science is the study of objective reality? Then, I mean, so like you're effectively out of this reality if there is anything next, and so we don't believe it anymore. But it's something that humans have always kind of believed, and I can't say. I mean, people who say that there's nothing, it just lights out and it's nothing. That to me seems as naive as someone being certain that there's something. But I'm not gonna. I would give more weight to the person saying that they're certain of something because, well, people have thought that forever, and it's not like people in the past were stupid by any stretch.
Yeah.
But I can't say anything about it because it's the ultimate unknown. It's the edge beyond anything we can see. I mean, at least as far as I can figure out. I have no idea.
Like sometimes I think of it as simply as like anytime anybody tries to describe God or talk about God or any of this stuff, it's like, our minds are designed for this world, for human lives. Like they're not really designed to grasp, before, after, above, below. Like, so sometimes I think like, the guy who says there is nothing, like he might be right, because our minds could never grasp what is beyond this tiny little bit we're meant to understand. And the guy who believes there is something, because there's some kind of feeling or memory or remembering, that guy's right too. Like, maybe we're all right.
Yeah.
Because we've all drawn them down to these conceptual stories we can understand in this life. Below them all is a truth that might be universal. And we've just drawn pictures around it. Or put words on it. Like, I think sometimes it's foolish to try to grasp something that's... Like, how can you try to grasp, like, okay, so how can I understand life without a brain when the only way I understand things is by using my brain?
Exactly.
Yeah. Is that possible?
Yeah. This brings me, this kind of ties in nicely to, because I was just meditating the other day, and sometimes when I meditate, I'll just, focus on the breathing and bring my mind to the breathing whenever I stray. But then other times I'll just have a notebook and I'll write whatever comes up as I'm going through it. And so I got thinking about yoga a lot, and on the point of how, like, okay, you can make a case that there is no existing in this way without the physical body. And there's obviously the amount that we've kind of made the physical body superficial and maybe treat it not properly. But because for a while I was looking at the yoga community and just being like, it's too focused on the physical in the West, and I wasn't seeing much people talking at all about all the rest of the tradition.
Yeah.
And but then I got kind of poking holes in my own thinking, because I was like, well, maybe the asana is just like, I don't know, maybe the Western yoga puts the 8 limbs in a different order. Maybe it starts with asana. And then I got just thinking about, because it's not like, asana doesn't seem like it's written much about, not nearly in detail as if you get into the writings about all the other limbs of the whole thing. The writings get more elaborate and they get talking about deeper and deeper things, but also there's the notion that they all connect and they're like spokes of a wheel, not like a ladder or something. Yeah. And so for what I got thinking about with asana was that the whole idea is to regard your physical organism and your vessel, like in a sense you owe everything to this, the fact that you have a body to experience everything with. And so you need to refine it and make it suitable for living. And then even from a more ancient point of view, things that aren't suited to survive literally will not survive, if you're not fit for survival. I mean, we live in a culture that's solved a lot of primary issues as far as general survival goes, to the point that people just take surviving for granted. I mean, when people's babies were getting eaten by lions on a regular basis, we weren't so disconnected